Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining ARC's Fireside Chat. This week, we will be talking about a guide to California's gubernatorial recall election. What's in a vote? So welcome. September 14th is the due date, or is the date for everyone to remember. California's Governor Gavin Newsom is up for recall, and we want to make sure that everyone has information they need in order to vote in this election. And to assist us with this is none other than Dr. Shirley Weber, our California Secretary of State. Secretary Weber, please introduce yourself and how are you doing today? And can you tell us what the Secretary of State's responsibilities are?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here with you today to hopefully share this information. Most of you know I was a legislator in representing the San Diego area from 2012 until I was appointed as the new Secretary of State in end of January this year. So I'm a newbie to the field of being a Secretary of State, first African American appointed to this position, male or female, in 170-year history of the state, and has an awesome responsibility. It runs a state agency, one of California's major state agencies, the Secretary of State, responsible for all filings with regards to all businesses, nonprofits, LLCs, you name it. Everything comes to the Secretary of State's office for filing and record keeping. We keep a lot of records on different things, and that's really important. We are in charge of all elections, of course, and I'm considered the state's election officer for all elections in California. We deal with the policies and procedures and making sure that your vote is protected in the state of California. We work with the 58 counties to make sure that they're doing the kind of job they need to do to ensure the vote of every Californian, that it is safe, that it is transparent, and that your voice is heard at the ballot box. So we do all that. The other thing that I'm always intrigued by is the Secretary of State also runs or is responsible for the archives of California. So every record of California is in my office in a section called the archives. I invite people to come see it, to be a part of it, to visit the archives, to see the first Constitution, to see the first registrations that existed in terms of people registering to vote, and to really get a sense of California's history, that we have not only major primary records, but also videos, conversations with various elected officials over the years. And so we keep all bills, every bill that's ever been written in the state of California is in the archives. So the history of California is entrusted to the Secretary of State, and I'm responsible for the state seal. So it's a lot of activity, but mostly people think of it as elections, and we are definitely involved in a lot of elections this year, not only the recall, but a host of others that have taken place since January.
Incredible. That's an incredible amount of responsibility. And congratulations, definitely being the Secretary of State, being appointed. Love that we have an African American in the seat for the first time. You said 170 years?
Yes, 170 year history of the state. Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. So also just want to shout out to the audience again. Please visit the archives if you want to know about the history of the state that you live in. Like, read it, like you have an invitation, go check out the first Constitution. It's there for us to be able to visit. Secretary Weber, can you give our audience the insight into what is a recall? What is a recall election?
Well, every state doesn't do recalls, but we do. And a recall is a process whereby the citizens can gather enough signatures to say they want to get rid of a person who's been elected official. And each one has a different set of rules and regulations that govern it in terms of how soon can you do this. Most of the time, you can't do it immediately after they've been elected, but there's a period of time, 60 to 90 days, in which you can actually recall or take away or remove an officer from office. What it requires is that you have to have a certain number of individuals to sign a petition that says, we want to recall this person for whatever reason. In California, you don't have to actually identify the reason. You just have to, you can say why you want to do it, but we don't have any valid and invalid reasons. We just basically have a statement that says, this is why I want to get rid of this person. And that's to be shown to the general public, those who sign the petition. And so you start a petition drive. And once that is certified, it goes to the public. The public has a certain amount of time to sign those petitions. This last recall election, because of COVID, the judge extended the time because we didn't have enough petitions. And so the judge gave them twice as much time to collect petitions as they had before. And in California, it only takes 12.5% of those who voted to actually sign a petition. That then triggers my office to begin the process, because the signatures are verified at the local level. Then my office then begins the process of the recall, which is to give people an opportunity to take their name off the list, get the information together, give them a certain amount of time to know what's going on. Then have the lieutenant governor, in this case, normally it's the governor, but because the governor is being recommended for recall, it then goes to the lieutenant governor, who then decides when the recall election will occur. Law says recall has to occur between 60 to 80 days from the time that the signatures are verified. And so by the time I do the verification, get it to the lieutenant governor, I think it was July 1, she called, she said, okay, we're going to have a recall because the information is in, and 60 to 80 days, put it at just about at the time where we are, at September 14th. It was within that 60 to 80 day time frame. So that's how it happens. Anybody can be recalled in California. Any of our state officers, our elected statewide officials, whether senators or others, can actually be recalled in California by a very, very small margin of individuals. Now, when the process begins, once the recall occurs, then you have these aspects. There's only two things that you can do in the vote, and we'll probably talk about that. You get two questions, and there's a certain percentage that has to exist to do a recall, but there's not a percentage that has to be to replace the person.
Oh, wow, that's it. And I think it's really important for people to understand how important their vote is. Their vote is their voice, and how our state functions. So I always want to make sure that they're informed and they're able to vote and are aware. And on that, can you tell us who can vote in this recall election?
Anyone who is a registered voter in California can vote. So you have to register. And if you're a registered voter in California, which means you're 18 years of age or older, and you also are resident of California, you can vote. You can vote in California if you've been convicted of any crime, felony or otherwise. You can vote if you're not serving in a state or federal prison. But once you've been released from the federal prison or state prison, you can vote in California. So we don't have these laws that says felons can't vote. We used to have a law that says people on parole cannot vote. Well, now they can vote if you're on parole. If you're on parole, if you're on probation, if you're in the county jail, if you're in any kind of supervision, you can vote. But if you are physically in jail, physically in prison, not jail, but prison, physically in prison, where the state or federal, you can't vote. If you're in the county jail, you can vote. And so there's only a small group of individuals who cannot vote in California elections, about 80 to 90,000 folks who would normally be eligible. So as a result, California has some of the most liberal policies with regards to folks who can vote. And we've been encouraged everyone to register to vote and to vote. We passed Prop 17 this past year. Prop 17 basically allowed those on parole to be able to vote. And I've sent letters to every parolee. And I was on a call with some of them the other night, and they've all said they got their letter from me, they've registered to vote, and they've got their ballot, and they're ready to vote. So it's really exciting that we've done that. And so I say to anyone, if anybody who is a citizen of California, a resident and a citizen of the United States, and they are walking the streets of California, they are registered to vote. They can register and they can vote.
It's incredible. So let me ask you, so Prop 17, restoring the voting rights for people that are on parole. Can you tell our audience, why do you think that was important, passing that statewide initiative?
Well, we've always had the ability to allow folks who have committed felonies in California to vote. That was done years ago. And some states still don't allow them to do that. Because people want to serve their term. And they've done whatever's necessary, and they're out on parole, which means they're not a threat to anybody physically. And they're surely not a threat to democracy with regards to people's rights to vote. So it becomes important that we recognize that folks have paid their dues. That's number one. But number two, that voting is a right and a privilege to every person who's a citizen. And as a result of that, they have the right to vote. This country was founded on no taxation without representation, which means you can't govern me if I can't vote. And I have the right to determine who governs me. And all of those things. But in addition to that, we've looked at the situation and that most folks who are voting citizens do not commit crimes. They're not the ones who are causing the tremendous amount of confusion, if there is confusion in our society. Generally, folks who vote are engaged, they're law-abiding, and as well as the fact that when you begin to vote, you become a better citizen. You become more engaged in your community and the places around you, because now you have a voice. Where if you're not voting, you're not committed to who gets elected. You're not committed to people who are trying to change the world or who are even making your life miserable. You are committed just to yourself because you're not really being the person who's caring about the rest of the society. So voting really is a part of the ability to be rehabilitated back into society, and to continue to isolate folks and keep them from voting is really counter to what we want to do. We want incarceration to result in people being rehabilitated and having a job, having a family, having the right to vote, being engaged in your community. All those things are part of the rehabilitation. And we've seen how folks who take this vote seriously are better off in terms of helping their community and their families and themselves as they grow and develop. So it is a part of rehabilitation. And those who don't want people to vote, just really want to punish them because there's no logic behind it. And in terms of those who are on parole. And even some states who take away your right to vote if you commit a felony, sometimes have allowed folks on parole that didn't commit felonies to basically vote. And so it is a part of the rehabilitation process, and it's a part of bringing our family back together and causing them to have more of an investment in what's going on.
Thank you for that information. And just want to share with you, Secretary Weber, and with our audience. ARC puts out a quarterly newsletter to about 10,000 people that are currently incarcerated. And we included a letter from you to our incarcerated community members, including voting information for when they're released. Understanding, register when you're released. When you're on parole, you have the right to vote. Please make sure that you register and that you utilize your voting rights, as that is your voice in our democracy.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So what if a probation officer were to tell someone in the community that they're not eligible to vote?
Then you should ignore that probation officer, most definitely, because they're not the ones who registered you to vote. It's the registrar of voters who will do that for you. But if someone is giving that misinformation, they should let my office know. They should let the registrar of voters know. We have seen that happen, and my staff has gotten on it. We have sent information to individuals who are in the process of working to make sure that they get the same information, which they do, that we send out, so they'll know. And we've sent letters to our corrections department to say, listen, your folks need correct information that's there. At some point, we're even looking at supporting legislation that would make it mandatory for when a person is released, that they're released with certain things like ID, so forth and so on, and registered to vote at that time, that they'd have to choose not to vote, not to register to vote, versus someone who has to ask to be registered to vote. And so we are working to make sure that's possible. Keep in mind also that those who come out are out and need to get a license. The one thing that's going to be real important is that when you get ready to get your license again, they're going to ask you, do you want to register to vote? Because we register most of our folks now through our driver's license. So you can change your address in terms of voting, but you can also register to vote at the DMV when you actually file for your license. So we're trying to make it as convenient as possible for people to register to vote.
So on that point, I really want to ask this question, Secretary Weber. So can someone with a prior conviction that does not have a state ID or a real ID, can they still vote?
Yes, they can. They can still vote. They can go and they can use whatever information they have. Now, when they can register to vote, and then in the process they can get their ID. But before they actually vote, they still have to get the ID. Okay. So, but they can register. You can still register to vote, and you'll be assigned a unique number that will be there for you. And you would have to prove your identity, though, when you go to register to vote for the first time. So don't say, well, I need to wait to get my ID and it's going to take me another week or two. No, you can go and register to vote. But when you go the first time, it'll be indicated that you need to show some proof of who you are. And once you show that proof, then you'll be able to vote. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So here's another question in terms of people being able to register to vote. If they don't have a permanent residence or reside in a shelter or a transitional housing or halfway home or rehabilitation center, can they still vote without having that permanent address?
You can still vote, and you can register to vote. And there are various counties do different things. There are various centers, or there are various addresses, or there are ID that they use. Because we have some folks who are homeless and living on the streets, and they want to vote, and they should vote, because who they select as president or governor or mayor or whomever is going to really decide their future, probably more than mine, because they're going to decide how many resources we put into the homeless population. They're going to decide how this person gets from a state of homelessness to one who becomes sheltered. And so it's going to be, they will have a right to vote. We're not allowing the idea that you don't have a house, a permanent resident, so forth and so on, to vote. There are many folks who are registered at their grandparents' homes, their best friend's house, because that's the most stable piece that they have. Or many of our kids who go off to school still remain registered at home, or take a temporary residence where they're going to school. Don't allow those things to stop you from voting. Oftentimes people tell you those things, and therefore they create this environment that you don't think you can vote. You can register and you can vote. If you're persistent, you will.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Weber. Please, everyone that's listening, share that with at least 2 people. And ask them to share that with 2 people. You can vote. Utilize your vote. Make sure that you vote. Your vote is your voice in our democracy. Is it too late to register, Secretary Weber? Is it too late to register to vote for this recall election? And if not, what is the deadline?
The deadline for registering to vote and getting an absentee mail-in ballot is August the 30th. So the last day to register online or in person will be the 30th of August. And if you do that, and it's not that difficult to do it. I see we're putting the register to vote at california.gov, and you can register online, and you register to vote. You will get a ballot. You will get a ballot mailed to your residence that you've identified. So now is the time, yes, to register, and you should register. If you don't register by the 30th, miss the date, something happens, you don't get it, you can still register to vote. You can go on to registertovote.california.gov, and you can register. When you get to the polls, you will be given a ballot. It'll be somewhat of a provisional ballot, because we may not have had the time to actually verify your address and your identity and make sure that you're eligible to vote. You will be given a provisional ballot that will be evaluated, that will be looked at in terms of making sure that the address is valid, the person is eligible and qualified to vote. At that point, then your ballot will be counted. You probably hear on the news during election that there are a number of provisional ballots that are there. And that's oftentimes because people move and they forgot they moved, or didn't let the registrar of voters know, and they went to their old polling place rather than the new ones. And so sometimes there used to be this confusion. We've got a pretty good computer system now that really can map you and find you where you are. But if for some reason there's some confusion about your ballot and being able to turn it in or whatever, you get a provisional ballot. And you hear about these provisional ballots that need to be counted. That's the ones that we have to take aside and then really go through and evaluate the signatures and the information that's on it to make sure there's no fraud. And then we count those votes as well. So they will count. So don't allow yourself. You can even register the day of the election. You can register September the 14th and be able to vote in the recall election. Now, if you register on the 15th, you can't vote in the recall. So you have to register at least by the 14th of September. That day of the election, we can take your ballot, and you can register up until almost minutes before the polls close, and you will be counted.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. Please, for those of you that are listening, if you know people that have not registered to vote, encourage them to register to vote. If you're on parole, register to vote. Right there, it's easy. Register to vote.ca.gov is right there on the screen. Share that. If you're in transitional housing, if you're in anywhere, share that. Make sure people register. Make sure that they understand that they can vote and get out to vote. Secretary Weber, what can voters expect to see on the recall ballot?
Well, the recall ballot is really quite simple. And I think that's why people are getting it and turning them in quickly. Because, sometimes we get a ballot and there's a whole bunch of propositions and a whole lot of stuff that you don't understand. And, there's a pro and a con and a this and a that. And I can understand that because it takes me a while to get through all of my ballot and so forth and so on. But this election is fairly simple. It has two questions. One, do you want to get rid of the governor? Do you want to recall Gavin Newsom, the governor? Do you want to remove him from office? That's a yes or no answer. That's question number one. Question number two, the second and the last question of the recall is, who would you want to replace him? And there are 47 people on the ballot who want to replace him. And so those are the only two questions you have to answer. Now, if you don't answer one of them, your ballot is still valid. You know, there's some folks who say, well, I don't know those 47 people. I don't like those 47 people, but I want to recall the governor. So they vote yes. Or they say, I don't want to do any of them because I want to keep the governor. They vote no on the recall. They don't want to take away the governor. They don't have to vote for number two. Or some of them will say, well, I don't know if I want to recall or not, but if they decide to do it, this is who I'd like to pick. And they pick a person. So whatever you do on your ballot will count, but there's only two questions. Do you want to recall the governor? Yes or no? And you check that. And if not, if you do, well, whether you do or not, if he is recalled, who would you pick? And there are 47 people trying to become governor.
Okay, so Secretary Weber, can voters write in or vote for Governor Newsom in the second question? Because there's a write-in slot.
There's a write-in slot, but they can't. The California law says the person who's being recalled cannot be considered a replacement candidate. So his name cannot be added. So if you write his name in, it won't count. That won't count, but your vote saying no will count. Okay. So your vote no will count. If you want to write Gavin Newsom because you want to make a statement, if you can do that, but it won't count. We won't have a whole slew. I mean, we'll see what it is, but it cannot influence it. He can't, in other words, he can't be recalled and voted in at the same time. That's number one. But so we don't allow that. Also, there are candidates to be a recall. I mean, to be a write-in candidate, you just can't walk off the street and all of a sudden decide to be a write-in candidate. You have to file papers. We have to validate that you are a legitimate candidate. So we are taking those signatures now. People have up to 14 days before the election to actually be a candidate for recall, a replacement candidate. So until I think this Tuesday or next Wednesday is the deadline date for all write-in people who want to be write-ins. And there's some who missed the date of filing or who didn't want to pay certain things or whatever that will show up as recall candidates. You can pick one of those if you choose to. If you don't like the others and one of the recalls somehow or another speaks to you, you can do that. But you can't just write anybody in name in. But equally important, several have asked, why can't we allow Mr. Newsom to basically be a replacement candidate? Because he is a subject of the recall. And the recall law says you cannot put his name in there. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Secretary Weber.
Mm-hmm.
For the other, there was 47 candidates, right?
There's 47. Mm-hmm.
For the 47 candidates, where can the voters find information on these different candidates?
There is a guide that I have put out that on the front of it, it says this is the official campaign information, and it has a statement from me and it's my signature on the front of this guide. And this guide, I think, is about 20 some odd pages long. It has the bio of every person that is running for a replacement candidate. Some pictures as well, but definitely a statement if they wanted a statement. Some people didn't fill out statements, didn't give photos, didn't do anything. And that was their choice. But you can read about each one of the candidates that's asking to be replaced, and you can see the qualifications of them in the bio statements that's there. So there is what is called a VIG, the Voters Information Guide. It comes directly from the Secretary of State's office. It is mailed to every registered voter, and it has my signature on the front verifying that it is the official document. Anything else you see is not official.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. So if you want to learn more about those replacement candidates, you can see on the website or right there on a screen info on replacement candidates. Secretary Weber, what percentage of votes are needed to recall Governor Newsom, and what percentage is required for the new governor?
Well, that's the interesting piece about it. You have to have 50% plus one to recall the governor. If we end up with 49 or 50-50, he's not recalled. So you have to have 50% plus one additional vote in order to recall the governor. You must have the majority of the people saying they want to get rid of the governor. Okay. To replace him, there is no percentage. So you have 47 candidates.
Wow.
If they all got 5 votes, 5% of the vote, or something like that, and one got 7, you'd have the person with the 7% as your governor. There is no requirement for a majority vote for the replacement candidate, and there is no runoff election. When we did a recall almost 20 years ago, the person who replaced the governor did not get 50% plus 1. So it's possible to have a minority candidate as the governor of the largest state in the union.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. Thank you, Secretary.
Yeah.
So if Governor Newsom is recalled, when does the replacement take office, and how long is the replacement in office for if that happens?
Well, if Governor Newsom is recalled, when it occurs when my office officially identifies the final votes that have been counted and declare that he's been recalled. Once he is declared recalled, and the information is there, unless there's someone wants to have a recount or whatever it may be, the new governor takes office immediately. So as soon as it happens, there would be a swearing in. Once we agree on it, there would be a swearing in, and the new governor would basically take office. The person is in office because they are truly the governor. They're not a stand-in person. They're not this is somebody who's just going to hold a ship together until we get ourselves together. This is a governor. This is a person who becomes the governor of the state with full authority, as the governor has, to do whatever the governor does. And that person would be in office until that term ends. That term for the primary election for governor is next June. And so the person would be in office until would be up for re-election in June, and up for final election. The general election would be in November. So there's about a year and 4 months left in the term for Governor Newsom. This person would fill that term and then have the opportunity to run for a full term, which would be 4 years. So they would be in office they would definitely be in office for a year and a half, just about. And they would be in office until, and if they win the election, they would be in office for another term of 4 years. So it's not a practice run, it's not a preliminary. It is the real deal on March 14th. And if somehow or another the governor is recalled, we would have a new governor, and that person would have full rights, authority, and terms, just like the current governor.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. So get out your vote. If a community member, Secretary Weber, if a community member has a problem voting at a polling place due to eligibility or registration, is there assistance available for those individuals?
Most definitely. We have a hotline, a voter hotline, and the number's there that you have on the screen. We do have a voter hotline for people to call. They should definitely take advantage of that. They will probably be, if there's any difficulty, they'll probably be given a provisional ballot, because we try not to disenfranchise people and give them a provisional ballot, so that when we have less folks around us and less issues going on, that we can actually investigate, and the people at the voting polls can investigate to make sure that this person is eligible to vote, or make sure that they've already voted, or whatever the issue may be that they're dealing with at that particular time. But we do have a hotline. We have a hotline now, and it's up now, and people are calling with questions they have about their ballot, questions they have about irregularities. If someone tries to prevent them from voting, we had last time, we know that in the last election, some folks decided they would block voting polls and block exits on freeways and things like that to prevent. And we've got folks who are working on that. Our CHP is engaged to make sure that people have the right to vote. Our Attorney General is also involved in making sure that there are no obstacles to people voting, that there are no violation of people's voting rights. In California, our Bill of Rights ensures, voting Bill of Rights ensures that you have a right to vote in an unobstructed manner, that nobody can prevent you from voting, and that if you're standing in that line at 8 o'clock, that you have a right to vote if it takes 2 hours to get through the process, that there are some rights that you have as a Californian and as a voter to make sure that your vote counts and make sure that you have access to voting.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. Is there anything else that is important for voters, especially our formerly incarcerated community members or their families, to know?
I want everybody to always realize how powerful voting is right now, and always has been. And our ancestors, we know, fought so hard to get the right to vote through whether it's Jim Crow South or whatever it may have been, through the various laws that have been designed to limit us, whether it's poll taxes, a literacy test, or whatever it may be. People try to prevent you from voting. And right now, across this nation, there are efforts to stop people from voting. There are efforts to change laws in Georgia that says you can't give a person a glass of water if they're standing in line. I mean, how ridiculous can you be? There are laws that says you can't that they're going to close all the polls at noon on Sunday because they were upset the churches were bringing people in busloads to vote in Georgia, and that you can't take more than 2 people to the polls because they want to prevent people from using their vans to take. These are the laws that have come out and have passed the legislatures in Georgia and other states to prevent us from voting, because people realize that once we understand the power of our vote, that we can vote as we did and change the essence of what's happening in the Congress by us solidifying our vote and focusing on it and getting the job done. They want to restrict the use of absentee ballots. Some states say you have to have a notary to basically get an absentee ballot, that you can't be a permanent absentee. You have to apply each time and you could be rejected, rather than just making a simple request that you want your ballot by mail, as we do in California and as we have done over the years. So what is happening is we have figured out the system, and we've also figured out how powerful it is to vote, that our ancestors fought so hard for the Civil Rights Bill of 1965, the Voting Rights Act, and all of those things. So what's happening now in this nation is there's a concerted effort to take our vote away. And I want people to understand that, because if the voting is just so important and powerful, people are working hard to prevent us from doing it. It's kind of like folks saying they couldn't teach us to read. Why? It wasn't that we couldn't learn, but reading is powerful. Reading is liberating. Reading gives you self-determination. And that's what voting does as well. And so I want our folks to understand, whether you're a former incarcerated or not, that voting is power. Your vote counts. People see you differently when you vote. When you vote in great numbers, people stand up and pay attention to you, because they know that if they don't serve you and serve you well, you have the power to remove them from office when the next election comes along. It is powerful. And it's the most powerful tool we have, because my vote, even though I'm the Secretary of State, counts 1 vote, just like an ex-offender. 1 vote, same power, same base of power. Understand that. Use your power. Do not let anyone take it away from you. And our folks have struggled so hard to get here. And we've climbed this mountain, and it's been a difficult climb where we have lost Medgar Evers and a host of other folks just to get the right to vote. Let us realize that 1 slip of the foot means a downhill journey that's faster than you can imagine. We cannot let these voter suppressions and these activities that are occurring in these states keep us from voting. So I say to everyone, let us exercise our power that has been given to us by our ancestors, and let us ensure it for our children. So I want to encourage everyone to vote in every election, so they can demonstrate that we are here, that we're paying attention, and that we're going to make sure that they hear our voice and that we will be counted.
There you have it. Absolutely. And I want to echo that for our audience. Your vote is your voice, and how your community is. You get to pick who represents you. Your vote is powerful. It is your voice. Please do not think that it does not count, because it counts. Every single vote matters. You matter. So please make sure that you register to vote, and remember the people that gave their lives so that we'd be able to vote. Secretary Weber, I want to give you a few minutes for closing thoughts, because I know you have a lot to do. And I want to thank you again for joining us and for sharing this information to our viewers, for enlightening me. And you may not know this, but I'm gonna let you know, I'm gonna put you on notice now. You are one of my heroes. So please, if you have any last thoughts, please share them.
I'm just honored that I have had the opportunity to open some doors and to change some patterns of voting and bring in some different kinds of thinking with regards to us in this state of California and across the nation. I'm honored that Governor Newsom asked me to serve as Secretary of State. He knew my past, my record, the things I'd done to create opportunity for voting, whether it's Prop 16 or making sure that those who were placed in jails as a result of AB 109 had the right to vote. Voting is powerful. My family was denied it in Arkansas for years. And my father, when he finally got to California, registered to vote and voted in every election. He and my mom, and we had a voting poll in our living room at 351 West 45th Street. That was the precinct voting for my neighborhood. I understand what happens when you cannot vote, when people deny you the right to vote, but I also understand when folks don't think they have anything to vote for. And so we want to make sure that everyone has the right to vote and that we hold our elected officials accountable so that people believe that when you elect someone, they're going to represent you and your interests. I want to thank you so much for having me with you today. I'm honored that the folks have taken up the call. I was excited at my last call when I had ex-offenders who told me they got my letter, they registered to vote, and they had their ballot in their hand ready to put it in the mail. That is empowerment. That is empowerment. And that's what we want in our community because it strengthens us and it strengthens our children and our future. So once again, thank you so very much for having me with you. I'm honored to be your Secretary of State and to make sure and to ensure the vote of 40 million Californians right now. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. And thank you for representing us. And to our audience, please make sure that you register, get out to vote. September 14th is a very important vote for you to get out so that your voice is heard. If you know people that don't have a way to get there or don't know that they can register to vote, please share this information. Please ask them to either go on the website, check out our YouTube channel so that they can get all of this information and understand that they do have a right to vote, that they should vote, and that their vote is their voice for how our community, how our state, how our society functions. Every election is important for you to have your voice heard. With that said, I want to ask you to join us live on our next show, September 3rd at 12 noon. And again, I want to thank you, Secretary Weber, for joining us, and thank you for representing us. And thank you, everyone who joined in for this show.